administration. And according to a detailed report by the Washington Post, news of Russian interference first landed on President Obama's desk early last August, when a CIA courier delivered an eyes-only file directly to the White House. Inside was intelligence, a report showing that Russian President Vladimir Putin personally ordered a cyber campaign to damage Democratic candidate Hillary Clinton and help elect Donald Trump. So the administration was forewarned, but was it forearmed? Did the president do enough, meaning President Obama, to head off the Russian meddling? Joining me now, the former head of both the NSA and CIA, General Michael Hayden. General, allow me to show you a tweet from President Trump yesterday on this Washington Post blockbuster. Just out, the Obama administration knew far in advance of November 8 about election meddling by Russia, did nothing about it. Why? All caps. And then tomorrow he'll appear on Fox News, but already this tape has been released. Roll it.
The CIA gave him information on Russia a long time before they even, before the election. If he had the information, why didn't he do something about it? He should have done something about it.
I told Russia to stop it.
Tonight, President Obama, for the first time, publicly blaming Russian President Vladimir Putin for hacking the 2016 U.S. election.
The intelligence that I've seen gives me great confidence in their assessment that the Russians carried out this hack. The hack of the DNC and the hack of John Podesta. Not much happens in Russia without Vladimir Putin.
And the CIA and FBI agree as to why. Director John Brennan telling the CIA workforce in an internal message that, quote, there is strong consensus among us on the scope, nature, and intent of Russian interference in our presidential election. U.S. intelligence and law enforcement assessed that Moscow had multiple possible motives: undermine confidence in the vote, weaken Hillary Clinton, and help Donald Trump. Today, the president said he delivered a stern warning to Putin at the G20 summit in China in September.
When I saw President Putin in China, I felt that the most effective way to ensure that that didn't happen was to talk to him directly and tell him to cut it out, and there were going to be some serious consequences if he didn't.
Still tonight, U.S. officials say that Russia's hacking of U.S. political organizations continues unabated. Since the election, one attempted breach targeted the Clinton campaign, though unsuccessfully. President-elect Trump, however, continues to dismiss the U.S. assessment that Russia is responsible.
We had a meeting.
Despite the fact that he is being provided the intelligence behind that assessment in his classified briefings.
The Obama administration retaliates against Russia after determining the country interfered with our election. President Obama announced a series of actions today and says the response won't stop there. More now from Fox's Rich Edson at the State Department. Rich?
Good afternoon, Kimberly. And a widespread response from the Obama administration, especially on the sanctions front. They have sanctioned the top Russian intelligence services, the GRU and the FSB, along with top Russian officials, individuals, and companies. On top of that, the U.S. is kicking out 35 Russian diplomats based in the United States. In a statement, the State Department says, quote, the department took these actions as part of a comprehensive response to Russia's interference in the U.S. election and to a pattern of harassment of our diplomats overseas. Republican Senators John McCain and Lindsey Graham in a statement say, quote, the retaliatory measures announced by the Obama administration today are long overdue, but ultimately they are a small price for Russia to pay for its brazen attack on American democracy. The two senators say they will also push increased Russian sanctions in next year's Senate sessions. Also, the Obama administration says it is closing down 2 Russian pieces of property that the administration charges the Russians used for intelligence gathering. Russian officials say they will retaliate. Kimberly, back to you.
All right, thanks, Rich. Now, we haven't heard yet today from President-elect Trump, but yesterday he said this about the hacking controversy.
I think we ought to get on with our lives. I think that computers have complicated lives very greatly. The whole, age of computer has made it where nobody knows exactly what's going on. We have speed, we have a lot of other things, but I'm not sure you have the kind of security that you need. But I have not spoken with the senators, and I certainly will be over a period of time.
All right, so that response yesterday from President-elect Donald Trump, Bowling, no word yet from the president-to-be, but definitely an international situation.
No, they're telling me Vladimir Putin is weighing in right now, and he's saying, quote,
yeah.
That's all you got? No, honestly,
in.
look, so they're expelling 35 Russian diplomats, spies, get them out of here, get them out of here, get them out of here. And then the two, what we'll call them cells, that, you know, one in Maryland, one in, I believe, in the West Coast. They're going to close those down as well. They were spying machines. Well, you should have done that a long time ago. But as far as sanctions, these are pretty toothless sanctions. There's no economic sanctions. There's no oil embargo sanctions. There's nothing like that. What President Obama has done, though, he's effectively painted Donald Trump in the corner, President Donald Trump in the corner, because Trump has, yesterday you heard that comment saying, hey, let's move on with our lives, meaning let's go forward, take the step forward and increase the relationship or embrace the relationship with Russia. But President Obama has now done is said, listen, Donald Trump, if you want to remove these sanctions, you're basically going against our FBI, CIA, DNI, and eliminating their opinion from what President Obama did. And I think that's a very difficult thing he's going to have to tightrope, probably with the help of the Russians. But as far as sanctions go, there was nothing there. There's no there there.
Now, Katie, what about this, the timing of it, you know, with just, what, less than 3 weeks till there is a new administration really putting us in a corner here with Russia and saying, okay, these operatives are out. I mean, President Obama knew about this to begin with.
Right.
Why didn't he do something then?
Look, I think that President Obama's move to at least look like we're doing something about Russian interference is important, and I think we should take a step back and take politics out of this. I don't think that Democrats or Republicans should be cheering about benefiting or being hurt by what the Russians may have done. But that being said, I agree with Eric. This seems like a very weak response by President Obama, which means two things. A, it's deeply political, which is very obvious. And the second thing is that President Obama has to walk a very tight rope here, because if we respond with a full-on cyber attack, the Russians will respond to us, which could put us into a full-blown cyber war. And based on our infrastructure and what the cyber analysts have been saying over the past 10 years, the United States isn't ready for that. We don't have the infrastructure to protect against something like that. And so based on the timing, yes, it's political, but based on the long-term prospect of this, Russian interference in our national security and foreign policy, no matter what it is, whether it's an election or whether it's something else, we should all be condemning that, which
shouldn't be tolerated.
Right, shouldn't be tolerated.
It's the same guy who said, look, it may be the Chinese or it may be a 400-pound guy in New Jersey sitting in his bed. Is he trying to have it both ways? Like, hey, why didn't Obama do something, while at the same time being dismissive of it?
Well, Michael, I think he is. And let's keep in mind that he has never fully embraced the theory of the case that you just laid out there, that the Russians actually did this, and it's up to him now to do some things about it. Now, look, there's an element of truth, I think, in what President Trump says. I think the Obama administration was light in its response. It's not that it didn't do anything. It actually did several things to try to warn the Russians away from this kind of activity. But I think, in retrospect, even the Obama team thinks they should have done more. But, Michael, one of the reasons they were reluctant to do more was the narrative that then candidate Trump had, that the election was going to be rigged. And so any overt activity from the White House would have fed that narrative as well and may have delegitimized the election in a different way. So even candidate Trump bears some responsibility here for what happened.
In other words, the concern, if you buy into the narrative of the Post, and I think it makes logical sense, the concern on the part of the Obama administration was the political ramification of whatever they might do on the 2016 election. And the consequence was we really didn't treat it, perhaps, like the national security matter that it was.
I think we appreciated it as the national security matter that it was, Michael. The article in the Post yesterday just drips with urgency from the intelligence guys, from John Brennan and Jim Clapper, and they've remained urgent about this even out of government. The problem was, what then would the policy guys do about this? And again, I think we're agreeing they didn't do enough. I think I regret they didn't do enough, but I understand why they were reluctant to be more active. And look at the circumstances we have here, Michael. We have a political campaign, and it's Mr. Trump's, that seems to legitimate chants of lock her up at campaign rallies. that praises WikiLeaks as a legitimate source of information, that claims that the election is going to be rigged. Now, I don't want to get into any formal witting collusion, but that may be all the collusion that the Russians needed to have the effect that the Russians wanted to have on our electoral process.
The lead of that Post story speaks of Putin's direct involvement, although it doesn't share exactly what's known of it. You ran the CIA, you ran the NSA, you know his personality. Does it comport with his MO as you understand it?
It does, and Michael, I need to put the caveat out there. I've been out of government for years. I don't go back for briefings. I did read the very detailed article in the Post yesterday, and it does have a powerful ring of plausibility in terms of all the elements in the article based upon my life experience. Yes.
President Obama spoke, the date was October 18, right in the midst of the election, and addressed some of the aspects of this. Let's take a look at what he said and then comment. Play it.
There is no serious person out there who would suggest somehow that you could even rig America's elections, in part because they're so decentralized and the numbers of votes involved. There's no evidence that that has happened in the past, or that there are instances in which that will happen this time. And so I'd advise Mr. Trump to stop whining and go try to make his case to get votes.
But General Hayden, President Obama surely knew at the time, according to the Post, that the Russians were trying to tap into 21 different states' electoral systems, and at a minimum to foment chaos, if not to alter the outcome of the election, to screw with us.
I think that's all a possibility, Michael. So you had the president warning Vladimir Putin in a face-to-face meeting, I believe in September, not to meddle in the actual electoral process. On the margins of that meeting, the president said something I found striking at the time, and now it makes sense. Out of the blue, he suggests that the United States has the greatest concentration of cyber power on the planet, both offense and defense. I wondered who he was talking to. It's clear now he was talking to Putin, and I think the president was fairly firmly grounded. The biodiversity of the American electoral process, I think, does give it a fair amount of resiliency. So I understand why he said what he said. But again, Michael, I return to the earlier point. I think even Team Obama now wishes they had been more forceful, more direct, more specific with the information that they did have in hand.
Well, what could the White House have done? What could the Obama White House have done differently?
So what they did do was to offer help to state election officials, and probably because they weren't as forward-leaning as they might have been in explaining the danger to state election officials, telling them what we knew already, most of them pushed back and didn't want to accept federal help on the grounds of some sort of federal meddling in what were state and local procedures. So again, Michael, being a bit more transparent, a bit more open, maybe even a bit more, can I say this, alarmist in terms, or alarming in terms of what it was we were saying about the intervention. Now, we did some other things. We warned the Russians. According to the story, we quite visibly began to plant some things in Russian infrastructure. Now, I don't know if that is true, but again, it has the ring of plausibility, demonstrating to the Russians, so far and no farther, we have tools in this kind of dispute as well.
What concerned me the most from the story is the fact that it seems that when those in our political apparatus were in the loop, they were partisans first and Americans second. You know, it used to be that our partisanship ended at the water's edge and we'd be united against a common enemy like Russia. But in this case, if you read that story closely, there was a calculus going on in too many minds as to whether this would benefit their party or the other party.
Michael, the saddest chapter in that long narrative yesterday was when the administration sent the experts up to the Hill to brief the senior leadership of American Congress, seeking some sort of bipartisan statement with regard to this, and they couldn't get it. The Republicans particularly backed away speculating here because they felt joining that kind of consensus might have hurt their candidates' chances. I don't know. But coming out of that meeting, you now have the administration pulling back, not being as forceful as I've suggested they should have been, again, to avoid the appearances that they were partisan and they were trying to rig the election. This was not our finest hour.